presentation. We have a wonderful group of speakers, starting with Ms. Ajanta Day, who's Joint Secretary and Program Director of Nature, Environment and Wildlife Society in India. Ms. Day, reshaping the human-nature relationship is crucial to achieve many different sustainable development objectives, including to prevent pandemics such as COVID-19 at the source. From your own experience working on human-wildlife conflict mitigation, coastal restoration, watershed management programs, and so on, could you please share with us what you have learned to be essential for nature-based solutions to be successful?
Thank you, Moderator, President and Chair of the session, Excellencies, panelists and delegates. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for the opportunity. Now, to take on to the topic, what we have learned is I work with very local communities who are vulnerable, marginalized, and my first takeaway is that deglobalization is what we should work upon, boosting the local circular economies, because people have returned from the areas and they are dependent on their various ecosystem services. But what we watched is that they are more of utilization of nature and not of extraction and exploitation. So more of the local circular economies have to be strengthened. And when we talk about sustainability of nature-based solutions, the first thing that comes into mind is the resilience. And when we look at the nature-based solutions at the coastal restoration level, we talk about science, because science is very important, strong basic on which the foundations have to be laid. But whatever we do, the local indigenous traditional knowledges are very, very essential, because however we do suppose I give you an example for coastal restoration of mangroves in the Sundarban Delta where I work, the largest contiguous delta, the mangrove delta, and it is very, very vulnerable to climate actions. So when we work on the mangrove restoration, which is the bioshield and the nature-based solutions, we work on the hydrology, the species selection, many things. But what we learned from our experience is that the local indigenous knowledge is very, very important. When we were designing the species selection, we talked about salinity, inundation, but we didn't consult the elderly people. And so what happened was that whatever interventions were made in last 20, 30 years, monoculture and all that we have been hearing of, so that has changed the species composition of the area, and we were baffled into it. So now we have a checklist in our work that have you consulted the eldest members of the society, so that they know what was there 50, 60 years ago and how they had practiced and worked and lived with it. So these are certain small things at the micro level. We are looking at the macro situations always, but at the micro level, which are very, very important, which forms the basis and the foundation of the macro situation. And when we talk about science, who are going to take it forward? It is the local communities. They have to be resilient. So that's what we talk about, and how the governance structures should be built. Like in coastal restoration, I gave one example more. When we build the mangroves, when we restore the mangroves, it brings a lot of ecosystem services to the society, like honey, the shrimp, the crab, the bioshield. And when you have the mangrove stewards, you have to have the value chain that has to be, that develops from the ecosystem services has to be strongly built. The market access to it has to be there. And these governance mechanisms have to be there. When we are working on the freshwater resource governance, we build the Water Users Association, where the women and the people are working together on the water budgeting, on the shared resources use. When we are working on the elephant-human conflict in the transboundary regions of India and Nepal, we are forming the elephant protection groups, the EPGs, and they are making the networks at the ground level. And it is tremendous when we see the potential of communities working together, taking the ownership. When you see the green brigades coming up, the women who take the ownership in protecting the forest, taking the onus in sustaining it forward, so that we don't look into a project scape, and it transforms into a program level when you involve the communities. And also to go on with it, we need to have the policies right in place which supports sovereignty. We have to go beyond security into sovereignty is what we find, where the small scale farmers need to have the market access, need to have the regulations, frameworks so that they get the access to it. And so to summarize, what are the transformational changes that we aspire for and we are working for is that food, which we all know that agriculture is the driving force for biodiversity loss, habitat loss. So food for biodiversity should be the slogan. And also, we have to invest in communities because it's the communities who will take it forward, who will survive and thrive, and these resilient landscapes have to be there, and also policies to have the sovereignty in place. And I'm sure and hopeful that the society, human society, will rise to the occasion, and we will do our bit in sustaining the future. Thank you.